Good evening, people. Welcome to YouthViewz. Harry Khan here again for another Sunday supplement of political update, real news, and a little bit of light humour where possible. Now, if you haven't heard already, we are in the middle of a general election, and there are only 4 more days to go before the people go to the ballots and cast their votes in what is being dubbed as a very volatile election. Without further ado, I want to introduce everybody to my very well-known panel now that YouthViewz is featured in the past. Tom, my good friend from Wales, how are we?
I'm all right, thanks.
Good. Dubbing that Labour T-shirt again, I see, yeah?
Yeah.
That means you've been out campaigning, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Good stuff. All right, we'll get a bit of an update on your campaigning in a few minutes, no doubt. And I don't think we need a greater introduction to the legend that is Captain Swiss, who has is one of my good friends and main influences in the YouTubing world of politics. Although our ideologies somewhat don't always match up, but that's what we like in this show. We like a different lot of flavors mixed into one. Captain Swiss, how are we, Swiss?
A tiny bit under the weather today, unfortunately. A little bit ill, but aside from that, in good spirits. I can say that much.
Good stuff. Right. Well, I think, listen, it wouldn't be a bad place to start. And those who have followed this channel and have been aware and watching previous streams will remember that Swiss, you are running for an MP in Stoke North, your local constituency. Yep. We haven't had a chance to really catch up even offline. I would suggest that's due to work schedules and your itinerary, I would imagine. We wanted to do something a little bit more regular, no doubt, on the streaming side of things, but it's been how it's been. But give us an update, because I know we haven't had a chance to catch up offline. So this is literally live news now in terms of how things are going. What's happening out there?
An exclusive, yeah. I think I'm trying to think of when the last time we spoke about this was. Actually, it must have been a few weeks ago, at least, when we talked about the campaign. We've had the first hustings event in the seat since. Yeah. That was put on by the Sandyford and Golden Hill Residents Association in a town hall that they had, and it was me and the 5 other candidates standing in the seat. Yeah. First hustings I've ever attended, let alone participating in as well. Yeah. So I was definitely a bit definitely. Sorry?
Must have been nerve-wracking a little bit.
Oh, definitely, yeah, definitely. I remember I definitely had the nerves going into it, and we were, one by one doing our introductions to say who we were about, and then when they call the name out and say, right, you're up, there was that moment of just going, oh, right, this is actually happening now. Time to talk to a room full of 200 people and see how it goes.
Wow, were there that many people there?
That we had, I think it was an attendance of about 170, which compared with previous events they've put on, apparently was a record for them. So, so pretty good, yeah. And I'd say it went pretty well. Obviously the typical thing for any political candidate to do is always to big up and go, well, it was a great performance. We really connected with the voters. Fantastic getting the message out, all the rest of it. But genuinely, I was surprised by the response that I got. I just basically wanted to go there and hold my own against the other candidates. And I thought, if I can just make it through the period of time, answer all the questions competently, and not make an embarrassment of myself, then I'll be fairly happy with how it went. The feedback that I got from people, apparently they thought that I was quite a good speaker, and that I came across as fairly honest.
You are a good speaker, Captain Swiss. Definitely.
Well, thank you. So I'd say it went pretty well on the whole. Obviously, the attention of the thing, as you'd imagine, was on like the Labour and the Tory candidate, because obviously those are the two that are, really in the running for this seat. But I think
it's not Ruth Smith's seat, is it? It's the other one. Is it?
No, it is Ruth.
Smith, okay.
Ruth Smith's seat. It's Ruth Smith for Labour and Jonathan. Oh, I've forgotten how to pronounce his second name. I believe it's Jonathan Gullis of the Conservatives.
Yeah.
And so obviously a lot of attention was on them, but I think compared with the candidates from the smaller parties, I think I did fairly well at being able to stand out. So I was quite happy with that.
Good stuff. What kind of things were they asking you then, Swiss? What's the mood in terms of subjects that are being discussed?
It was most of the questions were either on like local issues or what positions on a national level, how that would apply to Stoke-on-Trent North. So there were questions on bringing jobs back to the area. There were questions on how to relieve traffic jams and things along those lines. Sort of, fairly local bread and butter issues. I think there were 6 questions in all, and it was the final 6th question which addressed the elephant in the room that was Brexit.
Oh, really?
So we did kind of, all the sort of how will you improve the area in Stoke and this, that, and the other. And then the final one, I forget the wording of the question, but it was basically where do the candidates stand on Brexit? Or to that effect.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Swiss. She's a Remainer, isn't she, Ruth Smith?
Well, no, she's like some Labour MPs representing Leave seats. She has opposed their second referendum policy.
Oh, really?
So along with a few other MPs, she has opposed the second ref. In terms of voting for or against Brexit deals, it's been a bit of a mixed bag. There's been some stuff that the government's put forwards that she's rejected, and other stuff that she's voted in favour of.
And I note a comment earlier in the Bullet group that you said that things aren't looking great for her.
I don't think so. I expect the seat to flip blue, to be quite honest with you.
Really?
Yeah. Just sort of having looked at where it ended up last time round and sort of where we're kind of expecting in the national picture things to end up, I think that's the case.
Did she have a great majority there or not?
No, not a particularly big one, to be honest with you. And the seat was, it's when in the media we hear about these sort of stereotypical like Labour heartlands but Leave voting seats and how those are going to end up going in the election. Stoke North is actually a really good example of that because it's been Labour since creation in the 1950s, but it was estimated to have voted 72% Leave, so one of the very most Leave seats in the country. Yeah. And obviously, as you can imagine, like Ruth Smith taking the position of, say, opposing Labour's second referendum policy, you can imagine that's done to try and win back favour with some of the Leave voters in the seat to say, well, I'm not, if they're opposed to a second ref, I'm not behind it. But I don't think that. I don't think that in itself is going to be enough to stem the flow, to be honest with you. I'd put money on it flipping blue if it weren't for the fact that the odds won't give you very much return.
You did sound confident in the Bullet group, and interesting to see. I mean, what about yourself on the doorstep? How have you been received there, Swiss?
Fairly well, to be honest. However, pretty much the response that I'd expected I was going to get, which is, you seem like a nice guy and you've got some nice ideas, but this time round I've got to vote Labour to stop the Tories to stop Labour, or what have you.
And what forms your opinion that you think this is going to flip?
Well, I'd say demographics is a big thing, obviously. Like, we know that now, of course, what I'm saying here is on the basis of polling. So you may well wish to dispute. I don't think.
Okay. Let's get an answer that sort of mixed your polling analysis,
personal experience, and polling. All right then. Well, in which case, if we take the polling for just a moment, obviously it appears to show that the Tories are significantly further ahead of Labour than where things ended up last time round. So even if you're going to do a really sort of blunt placing of the national polls onto a constituency or a seat, it seems to indicate a majority that size is likely to flip. But if we want to talk about an experience on the ground, at the hustings that I did a week or two ago, it was once the question of just so you know, I don't think that the hustings audience, it's not like a BBC Question Time thing where they say you've got to have this many of this supporter and this many of that supporter. It was just whoever wanted to turn up. Yeah. So there's no way that I can say for sure it was representative of the voters, but I suspect it was. But what you ended up having in the room there was when the Lib Dem candidate and the Green candidate stood up to voice their support for the second referendum position, you got audible jeers and boos from most of the audience. For people like myself, the Brexit Party candidate, or indeed the Tory, basically all you had to say was that you were pro-Leave, and you ended up getting applause from the audience. It was kind of that
Okay.
Clear cut with the response there. As I say, Smith, Ruth Smith was more of a mixed bag though, because on the one hand she's standing against her party's own second referendum policy, which you'd think ought to win over brownie points, but then again you still had people saying, well, you opposed this form of Brexit or that form of Brexit or what have you. But just on the whole, I think, I know that obviously in the election there are many more factors as to why people will vote the way they do. It's being painted as a Brexit election. That's not to say it's the only issue. No. But I think if you just look at the numbers and I match it with what I've seen thus far, one of the most Leave-heavy seats in the country with a very slim Labour majority. And we know that Labour have lost out Leavers. Yeah,
on the balance of probability, you would be a safe better if you did bet in that manner. Absolutely. Yeah. But I think what's interesting within the context of that, Swiss, is that Brexit being one of the final questions of 6, and actually and I think nationally we've absolutely missed this because there's so much focus on everything that's not local, that actually at these hustings there is a real appetite for discussion of what matters to them locally. What are you going to do on the high street? What are you going to do locally? The local post office is closing. What are you going to do in terms of that? Which obviously has a link to the national scope of things. But you're absolutely right that Brexit is in a 70-odd% Leave area. Brexit is going to be on the cards, and who knows if the Labour campaign and to some extent the Lib Dem, but not sort of in a emphatic manner, but certainly the Labour campaign, if it will have done enough to move the issues that are being discussed away from one of the main issues that's been dubbed obviously Brexit. But no, thanks for that, Swiss. I think it's an interesting take, and I think you are in a very interesting seat as well. Ruth Smith is a controversial figure, certainly within the Parliamentary Labour Party. I've known of her only really for her despising of Jeremy Corbyn, really. That's the only reason I've known her name. And it'd be interesting. And listen, I wish you the best of luck with that, Swiss. Keep knocking those doors. And I'll tell you something. If anything, it must be a magnificent experience.
Oh, it absolutely is. I mean, as a person who's been following politics for a long time and has a real genuine interest in it, to be on the other side of that looking glass, so to speak, to actually be in the shoes of a politician and a candidate for once, rather than just a person who can, because I have come to appreciate it's very easy for me to sit back in my chair and just go, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. You don't have a policy for this. You got your numbers wrong on that, this, that, or the other. When you're doing it yourself, suddenly you realize it's a hell of a lot harder than you might have first thought.
Yeah.
I'll give you one thing just before we move on. Just if anyone's wondering how I'll end up doing in the seat, I think perhaps keeping my deposits is like the high end of the range of what I'm hoping for. Yeah. But I think there's a fighting chance I could at least beat the Green candidate. So I think I may end up not coming last, which as a completely new entrant with no campaign or money behind me or anything, I'd be pretty happy with that result, to be honest.
Well, listen, let's hope you do better than that. But
I'm hoping, I've got to give you the politician's answer, which is I'm fighting for every vote in Stoke-on-Trent North, and I intend to win and become a representative. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
as per Mrs. Swinson. But no, brilliant. I tell you what, it's been a privilege to have your perspective on this show. You are the first parliamentary candidate that we have had, and we love that, really. So it's an excellent take. Tom, I shouldn't call you Thomas, should I? Because that's not it. Tom, Jeremy Corbyn has been in Wales this weekend, has he not?
Yeah, I went to see him yesterday in Barry, which is...
Give us a quick scoop about how things are going out in Wales at the moment.
Well, majority of the south is Labour, and most of them are safe seats. But it is one seat in South Wales, which is a Tory seat. and it's Barry, which is where Corbyn was yesterday when I went to see him.
Yeah.
And it's a marginal, so we went down there to watch him and do a bit of campaigning. And I'm hoping it's going to tilt in our way. And Corbyn made an excellent speech. He's outstanding, as I'm sure you know. His speech was just brazenly intelligent, just so moving as well. He talks about every issue, not just Brexit or the NHS, just even local issues, which I thought was amazing. But here in his line, which is my seat, we're a very safe seat. We've got 11,000 majority, which is decreasing every election. It used to be a lot higher, but we're losing thousands each time. And I feel the Brexit party is certainly going to nick at least 1,000 off us this time. I think, personally, I reckon our majority is going to slip down to 8,000, which is quite a dip. But I could be wrong. But I find that our campaign here is very lacking. It's very half-assed, if you get what I mean, because we're a safe seat. And every safe seat fatigues, though. That's the issue. So lots of people are fed up with Labour, but they're voting Labour because that's what their parents did, or that's what they've only ever done, and they don't like the Tories. We've gone from being the popular party to simply the lesser of two evils, which is not what we want to be going for. We're finding we're just leafleting all the time, and when it comes to canvassing, we're not actually trying to convince people. We're just collecting data from areas, and it's just very lacking, the whole campaign, and I don't think it's doing us any good. It's just kind of getting cocky in a safe seat. And
it's interesting that you say that, just because I have had, by no means uniform, but I have had similar-ish things that I've heard on the ground in Stoke, like I say, because this was a Labour seat since creation, and once upon a time a very safe Labour seat as well. You get the people who say, I've been a lifelong Labour voter, I've always gone for them, but this time I'm going for Boris Johnson, or something along those lines.
Yeah, it's fatiguing quite a bit, this seat especially. Lots of people are not liking Jeremy Corbyn, but still voting Labour, which is nice. And every part of me just wants to ask him why and challenge it and have a debate, but it's more kind of just move on and talk to somebody else. The campaign is not great per se, but we're definitely going to win, but not by a huge majority. It's unfortunate, really. And it hasn't helped in the fact that Wales has always been mostly Labour due to the fact that it's poor, and we all know poor areas often vote Labour, but it's always a very anti-establishment sentiment around you. Like, lots of people voted Brexit because it was the opposite of what Cameron was saying, and they want to change whatever it may be, and they're fed. Lots of people have been disenfranchised by Blair's Labour because, of course, they moved so close to the centre. There was no anti-establishment feel about the party anymore.
Yes.
And Jeremy Corbyn has helped a bit, but lots of people are noticing how radical Jeremy Corbyn is in comparison to Blair, which is a bit irritating on the doorstep. But also, it hasn't helped at all that not a single Labour MP is remotely left-wing. Like, I mean, I like my MP, Chris Evans, nice guy.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say he's the most left
No,
politician.
many of them aren't either.
He's not a Corbyn fan. He voted for Owen Smith back in 2016. And he's in the Cooperative Party. You can tell if Labour members are also in the Cooperative Party, they're not often the most furthest left in the party. So it's an issue, personally, I think, that having more centrist candidates in quite radical areas, if you kind of understand what I mean. Like a lot of the CLP, we got a mixture of Marxists and all various kinds of socialists, and none of it matches any Blairite whatsoever. There's no Blairites in the CLP. It just seems to be MPs who
polar opposite.
So the campaign is going okay. I mean, we're going to win, but it's not going to be looking very good in the long run.
You sound very confident, which is good. I think it's interesting you mentioned Jeremy Corbyn on the doorstep, because we certainly, if we switch on the mainstream media news, we're hearing a lot about I'll hold my nose and vote Labour, but I'm not too keen. And myself, while I was out on some campaigning some days ago, people were saying, there was one or two people who were saying, oh well, but that Jeremy Corbyn, and you're right. You challenge and you say, well, what is it? Because let's have a conversation about that. Because I actually happen to I think quite the opposite. That I quite like him, and he's the character that I think the Labour Party have needed.
Yeah.
But there's not really any credible responses that I'm getting. It's just, oh, I don't like him. But I think that's
totally.
an indication, and feel free to chip in, guys, but I think that's an indication of how the mainstream media has absolutely destroyed his character. And I don't think any politician is an angel. There's no doubt about it that every politician has its little aspects of slipperiness within it. We see it in even Mr. Corbyn, when you are out there trying to please everybody, you often flip a coin that maybe doesn't land on the side that the audience in front of you wants. However, if you look at his voting record, this is what I say. I say to people, I say, listen, don't take my word for it. Go in and have a look at his perspective on the Iraq War. He's on the right side of history with many things. But anyway, let's not turn this into a Jeremy Corbyn fan program for this evening. There's a lot to get through. Go on.
Can I just finish up on the campaign orange? I was just going to say that we're trying to get people out to vote is priority as well, because we're having some people. There's one person who said, "Oh yeah, I'm not voting this year. It's too close to Christmas," and you get reactions like this, which is an issue. But also, the Brexit Party, they're pretty slippery around here. They're putting up loads of posters on public property, which is illegal. And do you know the terrorist attack? Was it last Friday before last? Was it? No. Friday before last, wasn't it? Yeah. Well, they suspended all campaign operations were suspended, wasn't they, for 24 hours in respect. Yeah. Well, the Brexit Party were out campaigning during that period up in my local high street.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, completely shameless, isn't it? Absolutely shameless. So, yeah.
Could I ask you a quick question? Just because you were saying that the MP in your seat is more of sort of like a Blairite centrist Labour type, is that right?
I'm not quite sure if he's a Blairite, but
not on the left.
He's not on the left of the party. No.
I'm just interested to know, like, on the ground, whether it's things that your candidate for MP is saying, or like in terms of what what messages you're trying to put forwards, like what exactly the pitch that they're making to the voters is, because obviously it may well be that they don't sit on Corbyn's bit of the party. But given, I assume, that all of the Labour candidates are at least signed up to the manifesto that they're standing on, is he still advocating for the Labour policies that they're standing on, if that makes sense? Or is he just not talking about them much?
Well, I'll start with the reason we know he's a centrist. It's just you look at his voting record, and when Corbyn first came to power, he was vocally against him in the CLP. But he's when it comes to the doorstep, he's not like openly against Corbyn. He campaigns for the party, but it's like I said, our campaign is pretty empty. It's kind of, you go up to a voter, talk to them, but it's never about policy. It's never about issues, because, like I said, we don't stay there long. It's just like, we find out whether they're voting Labour or not, and kind of just head off. That's the type of campaign we got here, because, like I said, it's a safe seat. It's more data collecting than actual canvassing.
Probably born out of arrogance. It is arrogance, and I think we are seeing this in various places. But I think I wouldn't agree that that's the right way to go, because I think you should fight for every seat and not take nothing for granted.
Like, for example, our timetable, we've got canvassing in the mornings and leafletings in the afternoons. Leafleting starts at 5:30 onwards, and whenever we go canvassing, there's nobody in, so we just end up leafleting anyway. And then on the Saturdays when we canvass, there's hardly anybody in, because we're there at like 10:30, everybody's out. And then when people are there, we kind of just ask whether they're voting Labour or not, write it down on a clipboard, and that's it. If you engage in conversation, you're holding up the group, and it's like, well, what's the point of this canvassing? We just end up leafleting. We should really be canvassing in the evenings, I think, because that's when people are in. But apparently we've got excuses like, it's too dark, it's confrontational, people won't want to come out and see you. And it's like, well, they're not seeing us at all any other way. What's the point of going leafleting at the only time people are in? Like, I mean, when you put a leaflet through the door, who actually engages and goes, "Oh yeah, I'm going to vote Labour," because it's bullet points. They're useless, to be honest. So we're better off actually engaging and talking to people. But like I said, it's safe seats, half-assed campaign.
I think you are barking up the right tree there, because it does sound like a choice between quality versus quantity. You know, like what kind of conversations you're having with people on the doorstep versus how many you can go and reach in one go. Like, obviously, because for the most part, I'm pretty much like a one-man campaign team here in this seat. Yeah. I recognised all the way at the beginning of the thing I was never going to be able to reach every house in the constituency. It just wasn't going to happen. So when I do chat to people, I do have more of an opportunity to actually speak to them for a few minutes at a time. You know, I guess because I'm not timetabling myself to say I've got to do X many houses in X amount of time. And there is a benefit to that, because you can actually find out what the voters are thinking about things, and what things matter to them as well. And perhaps if you've got long enough to talk to them, and they'll go, well, I like, you know, I think the NHS should have more money, but I'm not a big fan of this policy or whatever. And then you're able to explain to them, well, actually, we're doing this for this thing as well. And, you know, I suppose that's the trouble, that if you're part of a campaigning team, you've already got a predefined structure of the way that you're supposed to do things, and you've got to keep to that timetable, and you've got to match that number of houses in one go. Yeah, and it is a bit of a shame, because I think if you were given a bit more of a free rein, there'd possibly be the scope to be able to change some people's minds on the doorstep, rather than just registering who's already supporting who isn't.
Yeah, to be honest, I reckon if we were given a bit more freedom in this, or if we could just canvass more and properly, we could up that majority, I reckon. If we do this properly, I reckon there'd be no more decrease in our majority. Because to be honest, when we actually engage and talk to people, it's not hard to convince them. Like, I don't mean to generalise, but generally speaking, what they know about the Labour manifesto, they generally haven't read from the manifesto. Is always like, oh yeah, I like Labour's ideas, but I'm going to have to pay loads more tax. But then you're like, oh, actually, but we never get the chance to do that. So it's unfortunate. If we could campaign properly, and if this wasn't such a cocky, safe seat, I reckon we could probably up that majority. And
well, I have some ideas for you, Tom. I have some ideas for you, because if you actually look at the screen I've shared, I think you should be heading in the direction of Momentum, really, because their campaign is a lot more better structured. They've got they're using data a lot more effectively. I mean, they are even, from what I'm hearing, and you can see on screen as well, they're arranging coaches all over the country, targeting seats that are actually sort of seats that could go either way. And swarming like bees into those seats. So you could catch a coach, for example. They're setting up free coaches from, you know, let's say the nearest to me is in Birmingham, and they'll be travelling to God knows where, and you'll be going out doing real canvassing, really. So I don't know if you've done that already, but that's.
I will add one last thing, that there is potential downsides to, you know, even though we all seem to agree it's much better to have sort of quality long form conversations with people. I did speak to someone last week who spent about 5-10 minutes talking, and only at the very end they said, I'm not registered to vote. Is it too late to register? And I went, yes, it's too late. I thought I had a vote in the bag.
You could have convinced about 5 people in that time, maybe.
Oh my God.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And that's why I think certainly, Tom, some great experience that you've got there, but I think certainly the time that I would use up for the remainder of the next 4 days should be.
Yeah. I might do some canvassing on my own, to be honest, but I just want to touch on Momentum quickly, just saying that they don't come to my seat because it's a safe seat, and they barely come to South Wales because they're all safe seats apart from Barry, but even then, that's quite a long way from me. Yeah. So kind of isolated you between losers' safe seats, which is unfortunate, really. But, well, I say unfortunate, it's a good thing, because more Labour MPs. But
it is. But you want to get out there and practice your training. So, yeah, I get that. So,
we want more people we convince, the better.
Absolutely, and that's to anybody's just viewing that's interested in increasing their scope with campaigning. That join Momentum if you haven't already. They've got a very, very good network of campaigning, and certainly with marginal seats up and down the country, they will be absolutely storming those seats with individuals. So yeah, you mentioned earlier Jeremy Corbyn and sort of how he's been perceived on the doorstep. He's also been adjudged on a number of debate shows since we've last spoke, and the two that I can certainly, or certainly the one that I can think of that took place this week, was the head-to-head, the BBC head-to-head. I can't remember the name of the lady who presented it, but certainly the one on no, actually it was the Radio 4 presenter, the chap who presented it, and the poll that came out following that had those magic numbers: Swiss 52-48.
Oh yes,
there's a curve going on. Had that in favour of Boris Johnson. Now, listen, look, I like to. I'm a staunch Labour supporter, and those who watch this channel, they know that. But I like to think that I have a little bit of honesty as well. And I'm sorry, Tom, I'll pull you in on this as well. And I don't know if you guys did catch the debate, but I couldn't see that. I think if it was shaded in any way, if you're shading either way, it would have shaded towards Mr. Corbyn personally. But I don't know if you guys watched it.
I didn't see it. Sorry.
I ended up watching it not quite live, but a little while afterwards. And like to get that sort of response in a snap poll after the debate, 52-48, it doesn't really matter whether it's 52 in favour of whichever candidate. It basically says, as far as those replying are concerned, there wasn't a clear winner. You know, that's the takeaway, isn't it? Yeah. And to be honest, that's probably the take I'd give on it. I saw the other head-to-head between Boris and Corbyn from a week or two ago.
Yeah.
And I'd say that both of them individually put in a better performance than they had the last time round.
Yeah.
I especially noticed it seemed like they'd kind of refined their messages a little bit. So I just want to give two very quick examples. The first was... you know how Labour had those redacted documents that they brought out about the preliminary talks between the government and the USA, and they were saying, you know, this is evidence that the Tories want to sell the NHS to Trump. Now, I'd noticed them using that kind of phrasing when it came to like social media stuff regarding that, and I can't quite remember whether the phrase was used in the first debate or not. It may have been, but I noticed in this debate. That phrase didn't end up getting used. You never quite heard Corbyn say sell the NHS to Trump or stuff to that effect. Instead, he was talking about the possibility of medicine prices rising or the scope for there to be more private provision with the NHS. So I thought that was interesting that he chose not to go for the very emotive soundbite, so to speak, but instead tried to stick to the policy area regarding it. And likewise with Boris Johnson, because you know that we've had, I'm not trying to think of the example here. You know how there was that promise for 50,000 new nurses. And then obviously when you break down the figures, you go, oh, actually, it's they want to retain half of them and hire half new ones or something along those lines. And again, that was a point. And, you know, I picked up on this ages ago and have criticised the Tories over it, that it's them fudging the numbers, basically, isn't it? And in the debate, you saw Boris Johnson try and head that off at the pass, and he was the one to explain the breakdown of numbers when he did the pitch, rather than for the interviewer or for Corbyn to bring it up on it. So I think both of them have been away with their teams and sort of really kind of game planned what they'll be gone after on and how best they want to put forwards the message.
Yeah. I think the thing is for me, and I don't know if any of you caught tonight's debate. None of the two main leaders were there, but Angela Rayner was there. It was a Channel 4. It was the anything but Brexit debate today. It was everything but Brexit debate on Channel 4. I think I can't remember, Kathy something from Channel 4 News. One of the presenters from Channel 4 News presented it. Yeah, and I think what was really interesting about today's method of debate is that you saw. Angela Rayner, Shadow Education Secretary, absolutely attacking Joe Swinson like a Rottweiler tonight. The moment that Joe Swinson opened her mouth and said, and did a little fluffy lyric around, yes, I think everybody should blah, 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 blah. And I'm honest, I need to be realistic. You had Angela Rayner going down her throat like no tomorrow. You were the one who voted for the bedroom tax. How dare you stand there and say that? And I'm not saying, you see, Mr. Corbyn is not of that character. We all know that. He is a very polite, friendly individual, and certainly he wants to come across that on these debates. But I think when you have the sliminess of Mr. Johnson absolutely trying to take him to task, there is no reason why I don't think Jeremy Corbyn shouldn't be a little bit Angela Rayner-esque in his method of debate. And I want to see that, because I don't think many people who watch these, personally, I don't think many of these people who watch these debate programs are going to, I think a lot of us are satisfied with where we're going to vote, and we want to see the best for our party on that particular evening. But those small minority of people who are going to be swung and maybe hear a fact or two that they may not have been aware of when they switch on to watching these debates, they need to, in my view, see a bit of zealousness, really. They need to see some character. And although, you know, some people who will watch Boris Johnson and say, well, he's lying, I want to see Jeremy Corbyn calling him up on his lying a lot better than he has been. So actually, that's where I think, you know, Jeremy Corbyn shouldn't be winning or losing debates by 2%. He should be wiping the floor. Why? Because he has policy on his side. He has honesty on his side. Yes, he's going to be in uncomfortable situations when the anti-Semitism questions do come up, but they did come up, and I think he actually handled them quite well. Tom, what do you reckon? Am I barking up the wrong tree, or would you say that actually he's handling it about right?
Well, I didn't get to see the debate, unfortunately, but no, I agree with you. He's to be honest, there's not a lot to be done in when it regarding anti-Semitism, especially. All he can do is just say, "Oh, yeah, I'm sorting it out," and that's about it, really. So, sorry. No, go on. Just.
I was just gonna. I wanted to let you finish your thoughts because I had a little bit I was going to weigh in on there. I haven't seen the debate that you're talking about of Angela Rayner in it, but it's interesting that you said she was going after Swinson heavily on it, because I think, you know, when we've seen the support for the parties over the course of the election, it's fairly clear that Labour at the moment, if they want to gain more votes, it's probably going to be at the expense of either the Lib Dems or the Greens to a lesser extent. Yeah. So I think in this final stage, if the Lib Dems are still holding up fairly well around 10 to 15%, Labour's probably thinking we could really try and get a little bit more out of them. Yeah. So it probably makes more sense from a strategic point of view to be going after Swinson in that, if you're trying to convince wavering Lib Dem Labour voters to come over and back Labour instead.
I didn't mention, Swiss, sorry to interrupt, that nobody was there from the Conservatives.
Was there not? No representative?
No, they were empty chaired. So that's probably one of the reasons why.
Now you say this was the anything but Brexit debate. Is that a different one from the Channel 4 climate debate? Is it two different debates we're talking about?
Yes, correct. Yeah, this one was tonight. It was at I want to say 7. Oh, it's probably around 6:30. It started, finished about 8, and there were 2 empty seats there.
Tory Brexit party.
Yeah. So,
well, they've got no other policies apart from Brexit, haven't they?
You know, there's more saying. There's more saying about them not being there on a show named that than them being there, isn't there?
I think so who were those in attendance of this debate? I'm assuming you had Labour, Green, Lib Dem, Plaid and SNP as well?
Plaid did as well. Plaid's leader was there.
Adam Price.
I mean, again, I think now by the way, this isn't in any way me seeking to endorse the choice to not turn up to debates. But again, I'm trying to think of things through the strategic lens, much in the same way as, say, Angela Rayner going after Joe Swinson.
As you always would.
As I always would. I think on the part of the likes of the Tory and the Brexit Party, they probably look at those debates and they see, okay, there'll be 7 potential candidates. 5 of the representatives either left or centre left, generally anti or neutral on Brexit, there'd be a tendency or a possibility to sort of have a clear sort of ganging up of them versus the 2 sort of right to centre right candidates. I wonder if it's the mindset of just, well, we don't want to see ourselves fed to the wolves. We'll take the hit for chickening out on the debate because we think it will look less bad for us than turning up and getting destroyed by everyone. Which I think is also, and I know you were going to get onto this in a little while, but Boris Johnson not doing the Andrew Neil interview. I mean, I'm assuming you guys have seen the Andrew Neil like bit to camera that he did after the Farage one, where he listed off all the stuff he was going to ask Boris.
I've got it here. If it's a few minutes long, so I won't play it all, but I have it here. Let's just see where it is. BBC Politics. Oh, I've just lost it there. Here we go. And you click on the share audio. This is brilliant.
There is, of course, still one to be done. Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister. We have been asking him for weeks now to give us a date, a time, a venue. As of now, none has been forthcoming. No broadcaster can compel a politician to be interviewed, but leaders' interviews have been a key part of the BBC's primetime election coverage for decades. We do them on your behalf to scrutinise and hold to account those who would govern us. That is democracy. We've always proceeded in good faith that the leaders would participate. And in every election, they have. All of them. Until this one. It is not too late. We have an interview prepared. Oven ready, as Mr. Johnson likes to say. The theme running through our questions is trust. And why so many times in his career in politics and journalism, critics and sometimes even those close to him have deemed him to be untrustworthy. It is, of course, relevant to what he is promising us all now. Can he be trusted to deliver 50,000 more nurses when almost 20,000 in his numbers are already working for the NHS? He promises 40 new hospitals, but only 6 are scheduled to be built by 2025. Can he be believed when he claims another 34 will be built in the 5 years after that? Can he be trusted to fund the NHS properly when he uses a cash figure of an extra £34 billion? After inflation, the additional money promised amounts to £20 billion. He vows that the NHS will not be on the table in any trade talks with America. That he vowed to the DUP, his unionist allies in Northern Ireland, that there would never be a border down the Irish Sea. That is as important to the DUP as the NHS is to the rest of us. It is a vow his Brexit deal would seem to break.
And it goes on, guys.
Yeah.
It was terrible. I mean, I'm no fan of Andrew Neil, but I have to say that when he goes hard, it don't matter who is in front of him, he will rip shreds. Tom, is Boris Johnson scared?
Scared.
Why is he not doing this? And before you answer, let me just give our viewers who haven't. I mean, there's 7 odd million views of that. So if you haven't heard, then you need to switch your TVs on a little bit sooner. In short, the Labour Party and Jeremy Corbyn agreed to do the interview with Andrew Neil, as all of the leaders of the main parties have, on the proviso that it was promised that actually all of the leaders would do them because they know it's going to be quite a difficult interview. He's a very difficult interviewer. It so happened that the BBC and Boris Johnson's team were still in talks after all of the main party leaders had done their interviews, and he absolutely destroyed Joe Swinson. He gave Jeremy Corbyn a very, very hard time as well, and there was some real negative press on the front pages the next day after Mr. Corbyn's interview. But it so happens that now Boris Johnson has pulled out, and there's some real, as you heard, and it's a good 3 or 4 minutes, that interview. So I would urge anybody who hasn't heard it to go and play that clip. Tom, back to you again, mate. Is he scared? Why is he not doing this interview?
Well, we all know Andrew Neil is very biased, so it's easy to say that he wouldn't give Boris as hard as a time as he has, rather, as Jezza and Swinson. But Johnson knows that he's lied continuously over everything. He knows that there's so much evidence against there's so much evidence that he's put the NHS forward in trade deals with the USA, and of course the Russian interference report that never arrived. And then there's also the fact that his manifesto is basically get Brexit done and get Brexit done. But yeah, he's failed to get Brexit done in the past 3 years. I kind of think that he has very little to say, because as Andrew Neil on the clip he said just now, Boris has promised, what was it, like how many more nurses was it? Was it 50,000
more?
50,000, yeah. And a large proportion of them, wasn't it, like over 20,000 were to be retrained, 14,000 were to be from abroad, meaning that very little, I think it was 19,000 of them, were actually going to be new British jobs. So I think Boris is terrified of Andrew Neil because he knows he's got nothing to say other than get Brexit done, and Andrew Neil won't stand for it. He'll just wipe the floor with him. So yeah, I think he's running scared, to be honest.
Swiss?
The take that I'd offer, I think I take a slightly different view on Andrew Neil than perhaps Tom does. I think that when it comes to his interviews with political candidates, he's actually fairly good at giving them all a pretty harsh grilling. Now, I think that after Corbyn's interview with Neil, to be fair, after most of the candidates' interviews with Neil, they had a rough time as a result of it. I think that Corbyn had a bad time in his interview with Neil. And I suspect that probably Boris had a look at that and he probably thought two things. He thought, first of all, given Corbyn's interview and given the media attention that was given to it as well, right now, Corbyn's got all the heat from Andrew Neil. Maybe I don't want to put myself through that because I know that I'd get a strong grilling as well. But perhaps also he thought, I'm 10 odd points ahead in the polls at the moment. Corbyn's potentially having a bad time right now. Do I really want to risk the possibility of me going on and speaking to Andrew Neil and getting sort of savaged in a similar manner? You know, you go after Corbyn on anti-Semitism, you go after Boris Johnson on Islamophobia, you go after Labour on the spending plans, you go after the Tories on the record of austerity. You know, he'd still be in for a very uncomfortable time. The issue is, though, that I think, and I will say this as well, because you're on about the BBC being in talks and all the rest of it. I think it was wrong, obviously, for us to be allowed to get to the position where the leader of the opposition did an interview, but the Prime Minister was able to fudge sorting it out and not doing it in the end. But given the precedent has always been that all of the party leaders have always agreed to it, it's like we weren't coming from a place of thinking that the party leaders would be that untrustworthy they'd back out of the thing. You know, this is a very new thing to have happened. So I think you can say, yes, the BBC dropped the ball on that, and certainly at the next election, I think it'd be far better to have rules in place that either all the interviews are pre-recorded or you have it all in the bag, so to speak, so you don't have the chance of this happening again. So I think Andrew Neil doing his little piece to camera where he essentially says, Boris Johnson hasn't turned up to face scrutiny. These are all the sorts of things that we would have asked him. It's up to you, Boris, to come and reply to us. It's like, I think that was the best they could have done with the situation of not having Boris turn up. But you know, Boris's calculation on the thing obviously was thinking, well, if I don't turn up, I won't get grilled by Neil. Perhaps I've got more to gain by appearing as a chicken than I do of turning up and having footage of me looking very uncomfortable with tough questions. But I think probably not turning up to the Neil interview, because you know how there was like the Channel 4 climate debate thing, and you had the ice sculptures, and that was a thing of him not attending those ones either. I'd say that the Neil interview probably has more of an effect, simply because Andrew Neil is a recognisable face out there in the country. He's seen as sort of, you know, one of them political big beasts who'll grill people. Yeah. And the fact that he chickened out, but the fact that Neil then did his thing and saying, well, Johnson, you didn't turn up. Here's all the things I would have asked you. I'll say props for doing that. I will say props for doing that, because I think that if you're not going to attend something like that, then you deserve a bit of pushback for it. You deserve, if he's making that measured decision of going, is it better for me not to get grilled, or is it better for me to not look like a chicken or whatever, then it's only right that you have that kind of pushback to call him out for the fact that he hasn't gone on it. Absolutely.
And I I agree with some of that, absolutely. But I just want to pick up on Tom's point about the BBC have been much subject of discussion during this election in terms of their bias. And if you can just take a little crack at what Mr. Aaron Bastani from Novara Media has shared, you see pictures there of the Spectator Garden Party. You see the very, very well-known Laura Kusenberg, Andrew Marr with the Prime Minister, Andrew Neil in the bottom left-hand corner, a number of individuals from the BBC, same people with, is that David Cameron in bottom right? Yeah, I think it is. So I don't see the leader of the opposition in any of those pictures or attending that garden party. So I think, Tom, you're barking up the right tree somewhat. But I do think that with the scrutiny the BBC have received since there was echoes of Boris Johnson not attending or intending to attend one of these interviews, I think Andrew Neil has been almost forced to and compelled to put that video out just to show the we're unbiased kind of line. But that's just my view. It's my personal view. Take of these pictures, though, viewers, as you will. Moving on, guys. Had a lot to talk about on this, but we've only got 5 more minutes of you, haven't we, Swiss?
I'm afraid so. Yeah, I do have one eye on the clock at the moment, so I'll probably have to shoot in a little bit.
About past. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's have. We've touched on a couple of things. What do you make, Swiss, of? I know Tom touched on the terrorist attack, the politicizing or the so-called politicizing of the terrorist attack that took place 2 weeks ago. Yeah. Well,
obviously in the immediate wake of the terrorist attack, I was, as a commentator, but also as a candidate, I was cautious to weigh in on it too definitively, too quickly, because you obviously need to wait until the facts come out about these kind of things. Now, the truth be told, from what I've seen, is that ultimately you've seen both sides making arguments on the basis of this attack. Now, it's difficult to draw the line between what you define as like exploiting a terror attack and what you define as responding in policy terms to a terrorist attack, right? Because you've had the Tories say the reason that this person was released in the first place was because of a law for mandatory release at half of the sentence, which I think they say was brought in under the Labour government. The guy was released while the Tories were in power, but then the Tories since have or want to abolish the law. I think that's my understanding of it. So you can say, well, there's the Tories trying to go, see, it's all Labour's fault this thing happened. But then likewise, you get Labour going, well, maybe our streets would be a bit safer if we had some more police. And you went and cut all those police officers and we're offering a load more police. So again, you can say where exactly you want to draw the line between exploiting and just commenting on policy. I think it's tricky to say, but I think if you try and leave out, if you try and at least leave out emotive arguments as a result of the thing, I think that's probably the better way to go. For my own part, in response to it, because at the hustings, I think it was actually the night before at the hustings, a question had come up of sort of law and order and that kind of thing, and whether people ought to be carrying out sort of long sentences that they're locked up for and things along those lines. I think absolutely, especially if you're talking about people arrested for terrorist-related offences or things along those lines. I think it's absolutely reasonable to say, unless you can be certain that the person in question doesn't hold the views that they held anymore, either that they've been de-radicalised or that they've been rehabilitated, it is rather unwise to end up releasing them. And whose blame you want to place on that, whose door you want to put that at, it's a tricky one. It's like, do you say Labour who brought in the law? Do you say the Tories who were in power at the time the guy was released? Do you say not enough provision being put into the security and policing services to track the people afterwards? It's a tough one, but I'd sooner see people talk about what they want to do in future to stop this kind of thing happening, rather than trying to play the blame game between it's your fault this happened, it's your fault this happened.
Absolutely, I would agree with that. Tom, do you think that that this has been used as a political football? We lost.
Sorry. Did you say a terrorist attack, right?
Yeah. I mean, we've had Jack Merritt's dad come out and say, look, stop using my son's death as a political football. We've had commentators from media outlets that have basically come out and say to his dad, shut up and continue to mourn. This is no place for you to talk. It's lost a sight, in my view, certainly, of what we should be doing, and that is trying to make the world a better place from this, really. But it certainly hasn't, and it's just unfortunate it's happened. Another terrorist attack within the general election period as well. It's just crazy.
I haven't been following it personally. I haven't been paying much attention. I remember seeing the attack, of course, and then seeing the ban on campaigning. And I've heard about, of course, the politicising of it, but I haven't seen many examples. I've seen the Tories do it, and of course, this is my natural bias here, but I haven't seen Labour saying much about it. But like I said, I haven't really been following it, so I don't have much an opinion there.
That's fair enough. Swiss, is this? It's 9:30 now. Is it about time that should we smooth you out nicely and give you a nice exit rather than you saying, sorry to interrupt, guys, but I've got to go now?
Yeah. Transition me out with some grace. That sounds like an idea.
Listen, we'll transition you out by replacing you with another guy, Mr. Cooper.
Hello.
Sound well.
Sorry,
Hello.
You're right. Hello, Swiss. Would have joined sooner, but was on a train and I lost my connection because I ran out of data on my phone. I've been out canvassing for Labour, so hey.
Good stuff. Well, we're going to be saying goodbye to Swiss anyway, Cooper, and you are his suitable replacement.
Can I just say a final word before I go? I've got a hustings event that's happening tomorrow night at a church that's just up the road. I'm going to be sharing out details of it, all across the social medias in the run up to it. But it is actually going to be live streamed, which means that for anyone who's interested, who actually wants to see me participate in one of these hustings for the seat, you'll actually have a chance to do so. I'll be putting the links out on my Twitter and the rest of it. I believe it's going to be live streamed to the YouTube channel of the church it's taking place at. So if anyone's got an interest in that,
just shared as well. Swiss, tell me, is that wrong? Have I spelled that wrong, or is that correct?
CAPN. You almost had it.
But Labour and Stoke-on-Trent North. Sorry, Swiss, gotta say that.
Well, if you're a Labour Party member and you start advocating for anybody else, is that correct? Cap'n Swiss, yeah? Is that right?
Cap'n Swiss, that's the one, yeah.
So, guys, if you're out there in the Stoke North, pay some interest, go to the hustings. Swiss is a great personality. There's a lot that he's got to say. He's got some great policies and ideas. If he was elected as a parliamentary candidate, he would be a bit more loyal as well to the cause than the sitting MP there, but we won't dwell on that much more. Swiss, thanks very much, mate. It's always a pleasure to have you on. All the best for Thursday. And do you want to quickly plug your Thursday sort of itinerary or viewing for that evening as well? Or
yes, I'll do so very quickly. I tend to do live election coverage of all of the big ones in the country, whether it's a general, a local, or indeed the European ones we had earlier in the year. The same will be the case on Thursday night. I'll be here doing a live stream for the general election as the results come in as well. Obviously, I'm going to be going off to my count in the seat at one point in the evening. I'm still working out the logistics on that, depending on if I've got someone to come help me in person or not. But ideally, what you end up getting is a fair few hours of election coverage. We'll have the exit poll. We might have the first few results coming in for that matter too. And then I'll be changing it up and heading over to the count and doing sort of a live broadcast correspondence from the count itself, and obviously the results whenever they come in as well. And I'll be hoping to get a few guests on here and there for sort of little spots as well.
By the way, Swiss, word of advice, keep a tabs on the Stevenage constituency, because I've been told from the constituency Labour activists that wherever party that seat goes, usually is the one that ends up in government.
Oh, it's a bellwether constituency, is it?
Apparently.
That's what they're known. That's what they're known as. If it's a seat that tends to elect the same MP as the government ends up being, it's a bellwether. So those are the ones that are usually quite interesting to watch. Yeah. All right. I really will have to go, guys. Thanks very much for having me.
Take care, Swiss. See you soon.
Cheers.
Bye.
Okay, guys.
So
What
are we discussing?
Right. If you give me a chance, Cooper, I will bring that on. Right, guys, if you can look at what is on screen at the moment, Mr. Johnson this week, or well, actually it was last week when this was uncovered. Some articles have been surfaced, we can say, uncovered, written by the PM. He wasn't obviously PM when this was written in 1995, where he wrote about single mothers, saying that they were raising a generation of ill-raised, ignorant, aggressive, and illegitimate children. Widely criticised for these comments, hasn't apologised for them at all. Guys, I mean, yes, people can change their minds when they write things. I haven't heard of an apology from Mr. Johnson about this, but what I want to focus on, guys, is whether this will or can it change the Conservatives' electoral chances.
Somehow I doubt it.
Okay, why is that then, Cooper?
Because this country is so one-minded on Brexit, and not to mention those that don't, those that dislike Boris, and those and the same people that dislike Corbyn, like, oh, I'm not voting Labour because of Corbyn. So unfortunately, I think this is too late to change anyone's views or anyone's minds. Unfortunately, like that. Anything at all, we just have to make sure that Labour has to do is get their voter base out, at least to prevent the Tories from getting a majority.
So very pessimistic view on the campaign there from Cooper.
No, to be honest, I'm not really. I'm not really pessimistic. I mean, I still think Labour has a chance since I've been canvassing in Stevenage and Welling Hatfield, and I'm told in Welling Hatfield they've been gaining some votes from the Lib Dems there, and from what I'm told in Stevenage, Nebworth, which is one of the village towns around Stevenage, that's also part of the constituency, Tory voters there are voting Lib Dem. So
okay, well, okay, you're looking at things a little bit more technically, Tom. I mean, let me put this to both of you. My view. This is my view now. I'm not saying I'm right about this. I might be wrong, and John may be barking up the right tree. I think that these elections are won and fought and lost on the segment of voters that may or may not have come out to vote the last time around. I think when we look at the number of young people that are coming out to vote, it's at record numbers in terms of registration. When we look at, for example, the demographic, many of those people who are voting will be of the demographic that Mr. Johnson has written about within those articles. We know already that he has denigrated people from the Muslim faith. He's denigrated people who are gay, naming them as bum boys, and all of this has been plastered all over the mainstream media and channels. Let me just turn this off. Captain Swiss's. We don't want to plug Captain Swiss too much. We've done enough this evening. No. And those people who are watching these debates and those people are reading what's coming up in social media, Tom, I want to put this to you now. Just let's get your view on this. Is that, do you not think that the average, let's just say the Gogglebox viewer, for example, I was watching Gogglebox the other day and some of these comments were coming back and they were like, hey, 50,000 nurses, what are you talking about, right? The average voters, I mean, I think where I'm with Cooper, there's absolutely a set of voter base, people like ourselves who aren't going to change our votes. We're going to vote Labour no matter what, right? And the Conservatives have their crew as well, who are their voter base, right? But what I'm trying to say is that bit in the middle who, in my view, swing the vote either way, the undecideds, the people who are actually really looking at what both sides have to offer. many of them are going to be of the demographic. And when we're talking about Brexit and getting Brexit done, many of them are from the working class community where this demographic is relevant. Learning of these comments, is it not going to put them off, Tom, from voting Conservative?
Oh, I reckon it should, to be honest.
I mean, it should. I agree with you, but I'm asking, will it, in your view?
I don't know. I just think there's so much apathy and just a lack of trust on both sides.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a hard question, that, isn't it? But
I mean, I'm imagining the voter sitting at home, the armchair voter, right? The voter that's undecided, the voter that is, well, actually, I voted Conservative last time around. I'm open again because there are many of these voters. There are many voters. Otherwise, we wouldn't have things as marginal seats, would we? If everybody always voted in their own way, there would be no such thing as a marginal seat, right? And I would say marginal seats are made up of, in terms of the percentage that wins them, undecided voters and those who swing vote, basically, right?
Mm.
And so what I'm asking is that out of those two categories, is it not possible that actually many hundreds and thousands will say, I'm a single parent, I'm a daughter or a son of somebody who was a single parent. How effing dare you, Boris Johnson? Actually, I was going to vote for you, but after knowing that that's what your views were, no longer am I giving my vote to you. The working class gentleman who is sitting at home, come home from a hard graft of work, hears that on the news. I mean, it wouldn't be BBC News, let's be honest, but let's say he hears that. What? Boris Johnson, written on working class communities. I'm trying to understand, guys, from your experience and your opinions, is that, you know, will that have an effect?
I believe the Guardian segment of Anywhere But Westminster had a homeless guy said he was voting Tory. So,
do you know what I think? It's a good example. I've heard that spoken about in the group. I've heard of examples of the Tories paying people to say things on camera. I don't know if you've seen that on social media, right? I cannot believe somebody who's homeless would vote for the Tories. It's like
ludicrous, isn't it?
It is ludicrous, and I don't think that's real. I really don't think that's real. I think that there are. It's been talked about. Did you see that clip flying around social media the other week of that prospective MP where he was actually talking to someone on the doorstep and his mic was left on, and they caught him saying, "Yeah, don't tell him that you know me." Did you? Anyone catch that?
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of those. Look, if the Tories can go to the lengths of, actually paying for websites to manipulate and make it look like that they're Labour sites, like they did with the manifesto, if they can go to the lengths of changing their Twitter handle to make them look like a fact-checking website, then I think that this isn't beyond them. Look, guys, it looks like that we're undecided on the panel here tonight. So I would ask our viewers in the comments, will this, in your view, affect the vote share that's going to, or as John Cooper says, actually people are so far up the Brexit sort of avenue that they're not bothered whether they're insulted by these comments, that they'll still vote Conservative.
See, I think the issue is there though, is does that information actually get to the working class armchair voter? Does it though? Because to be honest, I met this. I was knocking on some door in Massey County the other day. Yeah. I say the other day, it was about 3 weeks ago, and this lady answered, and so she was an NHS worker, and I was like, "Oh, will you be voting Labour?" She goes, "No, I'm going to vote for Boris Johnson." "Oh, why is that?" And she goes, "I don't like Jeremy Corbyn. He's a liar, and he hasn't delivered on a single one of his promises." And I was like, "Oh, but he hasn't been in government. How can he deliver on his promises if you don't elect him?" But none of that. But she just no idea what she was talking about, and that's the issue. I don't think she's ever. I don't think she knows the first thing about Boris, because the fact that she immediately went going on about Corbyn when I asked her why she's voting for Boris says it all, really, to be honest. But That's the issue I'm thinking, is that Boris said that. He said lots of other stuff about the working class and single parents, or mothers, should I say. But yet, does that information ever get to the working class? So, like, because how many papers actually report on that? The Guardian might have, but what about the Sun?
Then
Well, I
that
know
was a report
What
like
about
that.
Daily Mail and
but I know it was mentioned.
Independent probably did, but
He was mentioning some of the TV debates. So let's see. Well, look, we'll see what happens on Thursday, but it's certainly something that I'm saying on the doorstep. I mean, we see the article here from the Independent. Boris Johnson described most deprived members of society as chavs, losers, burglars, and drug addicts. So that's there for our viewers to see, and it's something that I'm using on the doorstep as well. That look, if you consider yourself working class, this is what the PM has written and potentially thinks about you, and you're going to lend him your vote. Think again. Okay, guys. I mean, what about? Let's have a look at the other side of the scale now. Let's think about the billionaires, and let's probably end on this subject because I think we've gone over the hour that we said that we would, Tom. Now, one tweet that interested me a few days ago, or at least a couple of days ago, was one by Jeremy Corbyn, which interested me in the way, because he said, not one billionaire has donated or contributed to the Labour campaign. Not one billionaire, but he said around, did he say 13 of them? 13 of them. 13 billionaires have contributed to the Conservative Party's campaign. Interesting, Tom, isn't it?
Well, I got a big list here. Thus far, the Tory party has had 266 donations, totaling to £5,223,843 pounds.
Wow.
They've had 16. That was all in cash. I don't think I'd ever see that money in cash. That's an insane amount. But they've also had 16 non-cash donations, totaling to £126,853 pounds, and they've had 4 donations under the category of public funds, and that's totaling to 424,749. And there's one donation in particular that was before the election and is being paid over the year, is by Russian companies, and I can never pronounce this word right, but oligarchs. That's it. Sorry, forgive me there, but
Russian.
Russian, yeah.
Yeah, Russian.
Donated up to 3.5 million after.
Did you hear that? He said Russian oligarchs. Russian,
Yeah.
Yeah. Just in case, because of this Russian report.
Well, I just get into that there. Because that donation of 3.5 million was made just after Boris refused to publish that interference report.
The timing.
Ooh, yeah. And one of the largest donors there was Russia's deputy finance minister's wife. I'm not very good at pronouncing Russian, but Lyubov Chernik. Yeah, okay, you get the gist. But yeah, so she donated £450,000 to the party, and they also own their own company and stuff. But an arms tycoon, Alexander Tempenko, whoever he is, another Russian bloke, gifted 1.2 million. Involved. It was back in 2018. Now it was involved in a Eurosceptic plot to oust me, and he describes himself as a good friend of Boris. So, yeah. I just like to also put that the Brexit Party have raised 3.4 million in this election. I say raised. They've made that money through 13 donations. So, probably billionaires. Also, have you ever heard of the Tory leaders group they've got within their own party?
No.
It's like an elite dining club, and to join it, you have to pay £50,000 a year to be in it.
Yeah.
And 36 out of the 200 people in it have been granted peerage
Peerages.
Age, yeah. Sorry, I'm horrible.
It's all right.
And knighthoods after very large donations.
So they offered peerages after these donations, Tom.
And knighthoods.
Wow,
and they've been given seats in the House of Lords.
It's a big coincidence, isn't it?
Yeah, and one of the major donors, ironically, hedge fund manager. What a coincidence! Michael Farmer donated £6.4 million, and he was given a seat in the House of Lords. We've got James Lupton. He donated £3.3 million. He's now in the House of Lords.
It's a drop in the ocean for him.
Alexander Andrew Fraser, £3 million. House of Lords.
Oh, God.
Recruitment tycoon David Brownlow, House of Lords. And another millionaire in the air industry, Michael Bishop.
I'm going to guess that you're about to tell me House of Lords.
Oh, no, actually.
Oh, gosh, sorry.
No. And some of the next chief, Simon Wolfston, they were both made life peers. So, so in this leaders group, so they call, has raised £130 million or donated. And then all of a sudden they've got knighthoods and they're peers now. So, what a coincidence.
Cooper, why have you sort of completed that, Tom? Or
I just got one little thing.
Go on. And I want to bring Cooper back in to make a point on this as well. But go on.
I'm almost done. It's just a little bit of one I got here. Is that there's a whole wiki page of 70 odd Tory donors, and a large majority of them are businessmen, hedge fund managers, entrepreneurs, property developers, industrialists, and bankers. Says it all really, but also a financial services giant. I can't even read my own writing here. It's a bloke called Peter. Sorry about that. He's got a net worth of 2.4 billion. He gave £1 million to the party, and now he's got some special benefits because of it. And Labour have raised 522,000 from trade unions, and in that same period of time, the Tories got gifted £3 million from billionaires, and there's only a small group of billionaires that did so. It just shows the difference in contributions between the parties there. Labour's got trade unions consisting of thousands of people, and they got like 4 billionaires. So interesting.
It's very interesting. Thanks for that, Tom. I mean, Cooper, that the cynical amongst us may think that there's a reason there.
You try being positive when you're dealing with the Bullet Club.
Say that again.
You try being positive when you're in the Bullet Club.
The Bullet Club is what's the word? That's a pessimistic club. There's no doubt about it. But yeah, no, we just want to touch back on these millionaires and billionaires, and I think it's important for our viewers to
Hang on.
It's important that we have this discussion for our viewers. That we bring a lot of humour, and there's no doubt that we want to make this show as entertaining as possible. But just homing in on the serious point here now, Cooper, around billionaires and what are their interests in donating these large sums of money to the Conservative Party? What is it that they're getting out of it, which is trying to fund preventing a Labour government? What's in it for these billionaires? Tell us.
See, they don't get taxed. They don't get taxed is the basic answer.
Basically, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, free reign as well, isn't it? Like, for example, Gavin Chambers. He's a local Tory candidate in my area. Guess what? He owns a firm which trains nurses for private hospitals.
Yeah.
So, guess who would benefit from a privatised NHS?
Absolutely.
Gavin Chambers.
You guys, between you, I think you've hit the nail on the head with both of those answers. We're talking about tax relief and we're talking about interests. That's basically it, really. So many of these people, if you go in, and I'm glad, Tom, you brought some names into the fold, you go and look into their interests. They're people who sit on boards of the same companies that the energy companies, for example, that are making millions and millions of pounds of profit just for being board members. There's connections with their partners, who are also prominent, well-known MPs. I urge our viewers, go in and Google Amber Rudd's husband. I will say no more. I will just go and Google what his interests are and what she then did in respect of her husband's interests. But you're absolutely right, guys. You've nailed it. And I think I want to just end on, as Tom mentioned, the NHS there. Now, it's very easy to coin the phrase, the NHS is not for sale. And it's very easy for Boris Johnson to say, oh, what are these guys talking about? It's, as he keeps saying, Bermuda Triangle stuff. It's absolutely obsessive. It's absolutely incorrect. And he's correct in what he's saying. Is the NHS as a bulk, as a piece, it's impossible for them to put that up for sale, so-called. But I would urge you all to do your research and look into it's actually the methodology around what is happening with the NHS and what has been happening for a number of years. Private firms that are actually slowly under our noses taking what the government is doing is it's giving bits and pieces of it away to private companies for profit. And that's literally what's happening here. Now, a trade deal with the United States, a trade deal, don't forget that the idea is that we've left the European Union, a massive trading bloc, or we would have left them by this point, is the trade that the US wants to do is obviously one of the interests that they may have is our healthcare service in terms of population who use that and the profits that they could gain from that. And if you watch the Dispatches program, which was on some weeks ago, there's actually clips of as recent as January, February 2019 this year, where actually pharmaceuticals company, an American pharmaceuticals company, have been in discussions with our government around medicine prices. Now, what does that mean for you guys? It means that actually there is a discussion on prices not going down, guys, because that doesn't suit these people. Why would they want to decrease medicine prices? It's about profit. It's about increase of medicine prices. So, like I say, we will touch on this much more in the next few streams because I think it's interesting, and I think our viewers need to know more if they don't already. But that is what a future Tory government will bring you. Okay, Cooper, any final words from you before we chop?
Let's see. We have a few days before the election. The poll's saying that at the moment we're 9 or 10 points behind. Try and get as many people as you can out to vote, to prove them wrong. Otherwise, we may end up being stuck at the Tories during the age of 30, which I do not want.
I couldn't have put it better myself, Cooper. And while you are on, and I'm kind of glad Swiss isn't here now because he would have probably shred through this this particular poll that I'm putting on screen. I saw this yesterday. I thought I would share it in today's stream. Can everybody see that on screen?
Are you going to show the updated polls that have happened, or?
This was a poll from that I saw yesterday up until the 5th of December. It shows now only is that 6 points lead now.
Yes, 6 point lead.
Now there's a load of people coming out after saying, oh, well, it's a different methodology, and well, how do we know the different methodology that any poll uses? Look, I think, guys, anybody who watches these streams knows that I'm not a great believer in these things, and I will want to highlight when we see a good one. But I think I was on a Momentum call earlier, and what they said is that a third of Labour voters decided to vote Labour in its final week, right? Which means we can do this, guys. We can do this. We can get Boris out. We can unseat him if we tried hard enough. We could unseat him and his austerity monster colleagues. We can absolutely destroy them. Now, look, whether there's any legitimacy or logic within the poll that's on screen now, one thing that it does tell me, and I always remind you guys, what's the magic number, Cooper, of what the Tories were in 2017 when Theresa May called the election? Do you know how many points they were ahead?
20 to 25.
25 points. 25 points, and Labour clawed it up to basically force the hung Parliament, right? Tom, can we do this?
Yes.
And will we do this?
Yes.
Right. So get onto the Momentum website, put your postcode and details in, guys. We need to get rid of this Boris Johnson government. Whichever way we do it, we need them gone, because they will destroy our lives. I had a lot more to show you tonight in terms of the dispatches program from earlier in the week. The little 4-year-old boy who was left, who had suspected pneumonia, was left on the floor of the hospital last night. There are doctors that are coming out, guys, who say that NHS is on its knees. There is a crisis in the NHS at the moment, which the BBC will not report and will not show you guys, right? And for any of you watching, you will experience it yourself if you're unlucky enough, right? Let's bring a Labour government in, guys. Tom, final words from you, my friend.
Well, quite simply, that this election is a once-in-a-generation election. It is all or nothing. If we don't win this election and give the Tories another 5 years of power, we're going to have Boris's awful Brexit deal, which will more than certainly tear apart the UK. We'll have, in order to trade with the United States and the rest of it, we will have to deregulate, whether that be in the workplace, working conditions, minimum wage, and environmental standards. We will be poorer. There'll be less public spending, more austerity, more people on the streets, and life will be harder for everyone alike, apart from those 1% billionaires who will be avoiding more tax and paying less tax. It is all or nothing. If you value the NHS, if you value our high standards and your life as a whole, do not vote Tory and vote Labour. It is the only hope. And I'm not saying we need to remain or anything. And I mean, Labour's Brexit deal is far from perfect, but it's certainly more preferable than Boris's. His is awful. So do not vote Boris Johnson. Labour is our only hope, and we got to get these Tories out.
Excellent, guys. We will try and get. Oh, here we go. Let's just put this final comment from Sky Echo. We haven't put any comments from her today. She says, what was it Hitchens who said about polls? Polls are a device to influence public opinion, not a device for measuring it. I think that I couldn't have put that better myself, and I think that's probably a fitting thing to end on. Don't believe the poll above, guys. Don't believe any polls. Polls are, in my view, I would agree with that. That's on screen, a device to influence public opinion. Let's go out.
So I just want to say about polls. This is interesting. I was reading the other day that on the polls, the Tories have peaked in the sense that they've already got the votes they're ever going to get. They've mopped up them Brexit votes. There's nothing else that will make them go up in the polls. Whereas at this scenario, Labour can only gain, whether it be the youth vote and so on and so forth. The Tories have peaked in their polls. And also, something to bear in mind is the polling strategy. They actually based it off the second referendum. It's the highest turnout. The second referendum, the Brexit referendum, so its turnout. But also, something to remember is, since the Brexit referendum, at least 1.4 million Leave voters have since died. So something to keep in mind when regarding the polls, that the Tories have peaked, Labour can only increase. And as you said, 1/3 of the Labour votes decided on their last week. So don't believe the polls. They're not always accurate. So,
absolutely, Tom. Absolutely. Okay, guys, let's call it a day. Thank you very much for bearing with us this evening. We love to do this. I want to thank Captain Swiss for coming on earlier. He had to go as he's working this evening. I want to thank Cooperman for coming on. Thank you for coming on, joining us a little bit later on in the stream. And Tom, as always, we couldn't do this without you and your great research and the way you articulate it. Remind us how old you are, Tom.
16.
16 years old. There you go, guys. Look, who says young people are not interested in politics? There you go. You have it there right in front of you. Listen, guys, I've been Harry Khan. I look forward to streaming again. No doubt we'll be doing something jointly with Captain Swiss on the evening of the election, but we'll try and get one streaming before the big day on Thursday, guys. Thank you for being with us. God bless. See you soon.